Oh, wait. What about that one you just looked at?
Here it is. Yeah, it's this one.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong one. That's trying to find it in the wrong page.
Why aren't there any confused superheroes?
Welcome to AT Banter, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything regarding the world of assistive technology. With our hosts, Steve Barkley, Rob Minot, and Ryan Fleury. Now, let's banter.
Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of AT Banter. I almost said as usual.
As usual.
I almost fell into that old habit that you were trying to break me of.
Yeah.
But
We will break you.
I am Rob Minot.
I'm Steve Barkley.
Hey, wait, now you're taking my thunder.
Oh, come on. All right.
Come on. I'm Rob Minot, and today I'm joined with Steve Barkley.
Hello.
And usually we have Ryan Fleury here, but he has decided to take vacation.
Actually, he's had a sudden and dramatic sex change operation.
Instead, we are joined today by Rachel Nolan, who is otherwise known as the voice of the podcast. You hear her every episode at the beginning and at the end. She's filling in Ryan's spot today.
Hello.
So today we have a little bit of a interesting podcast. This sort of came about a few episodes ago where we just somehow ended up talking about disabled superheroes, and we thought, hey, what the heck? Why don't we make it a topic for a show? So it's a little different. It's a little unusual, but the more we started to research into it, the more of a relevant topic. It's got some meat to it. So,
and if you throw a little bit of pop culture in there as well, you've got the basis for a pretty meaty show.
That's right. You've got a whole jambalaya of a show.
Yeah. Now, I should point out that somewhere in this podcast, we're probably going to offend everybody. Because when you start talking about media portrayals of people with disabilities, they get it wrong so many times and in so many ways that it's almost impossible to talk about this topic without upsetting someone. So if you get upset, fan mail. As they say, there's no such thing as bad press, just bad letters.
That's right. That's right. Well, before we get into that, though, I did have some follow-up stories from some stuff that we were talking about a few episodes ago. I think it was one of our first episodes, actually. We were talking a little bit about wearable tech, and in specifically, we were talking about the Google Glass. And when I came across this, I thought this was kind of interesting, where the Google Glass is kind of still around. It's not dead by any means. I mean, they've taken it off the market in terms of a commercial product, but from the sounds of it, there are researchers that are still working on developing some pretty interesting technology for it.
Well, that platform, even though Google themselves may not produce the Google Glasses down the road, wearable tech and products like that may still be based around the operating system, the Android operating system. Our own new eyeglasses, the what they call the visual prosthetic for people with low vision, that is based on the Android platform, and I believe they call it Reticule OS, which is a branding of the Android.
Right. Well, in this case, it sounds like they're using the Google Glass in a series of experiments for children with autism to help them be able to identify emotions in people.
And also to get them to look people in the eye. Because oftentimes kids with autism will not engage with people. They won't make eye contact. So these glasses will actually, if they look at somebody, help them understand the emotions written on that person's face.
Yeah, so the way it works is that I guess it's an app that ties into the Google Glass, and it's facial recognition software. The camera detects emotions on faces, and then it flashes a word or an emoticon within the HUD to let the child know that, what emotion is
That
being
stands for
expressed.
heads-up display for those who don't know.
That's right. Whoever's not a gamer. Yeah, and it sounds like they've had some relative success with this.
So there have been some pretty positive results, as they say, in the beginning couple of years. Still in its early stages, but there's some hope that this is going to help autistic people quite a bit.
They seem to be really positive about the idea of wearable tech, in terms of what it could mean for assistive technology. So by no means is the Google Glass dead. I mean, and this sort of goes back to the point that I was making in that earlier podcast. I mean, there's still a lot of potential for wearable tech turning into some real relevant AT, I think. And I mean, this is just one example of that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it sounds like they're like you said, they're having some success with it, and the study's ongoing. So they say that if it shows positive results, it could become commercially available in the next few years. So this could be a big breakthrough for autistic children.
Well, I think that wearable tech, that facial recognition thing, it could be really, really powerful for other types of people like me.
Or men in general.
Because I'm really good at recognizing people's faces when I see them, but I will often completely blank out on people's names. So
Right.
you'll never catch me introducing anybody to anybody else, even oftentimes when I have known them for many years, because I'll go to introduce them and all of a sudden my brain just goes poof, and I completely forget what the person's name is. For some reason, I just can't access it. So if I had wearable tech that I could turn to and it would go, "Hey, it's Rob." I would probably introduce people occasionally.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good idea too. But I think this also has applications in relationships too. I mean, men in general could really use this technology where it's just like...
That's true. I see where you're getting at with that.
I
Makes
know,
a lot of
right?
sense.
I know. Wait, so I can go out with the guys? Danger, danger.
Glasses say you're wrong.
Don't do it. Okay, so one other minor news story that I thought was interesting was Amazon has announced that their new Kindle now has a text-to-speech option built into it and Bluetooth built into it as well, so that you could potentially hook a external Bluetooth speaker up to your Kindle and have it read to you.
Yeah, so there's a couple different models of the Kindle Reader that are capable of having TTS. One of them is the Alexa, and now the new Amazon Kindle. The article just calls it the new Amazon Kindle. I'm not sure if that's exactly its name or not.
It's probably just their base. They're just the new version of their base unit, I would assume.
Yeah, it could be. But they say it has Bluetooth to allow you to have stuff spoken out loud via Bluetooth. And it also has voice view technology, which reads menus and navigation items as well. And they also say that they've introduced a new adapter for no extra cost that turns on voice view as soon as the adapter is plugged into the Kindle's USB port. So this has been brought about as a partnership with the National Federation for the Blind, Go NFB. And it's going to improve accessibility, not just for the blind community, but for an even larger community that is print disabled.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's cheap. It's $80 with ads and $100 without ads. So
yeah, that's weird. I didn't realize that Kindles came in two different flavors like that, with ads and without ads.
yeah. Do you want to be annoyed? Or do you not want to be annoyed? Is it worth $20 to you to not be annoyed?
Yeah, I think definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely my annoyance level is worth at least $20.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kindles are dirt cheap. I got Des a Kindle for Christmas and she loves it, even though she was on the fence about it initially. But
I'm just thinking about $20 for not being annoyed. I wonder if that would work for me on weekends, when the religious people come knocking at the door, if I just had $20 taped up there and just said, take the 20, go away.
yeah. Yeah. Too bad we can't apply that across all our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. There's a whole business model here
There is.
tripping around in my head. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pay me $20 and I'll make sure Donald Trump never appears on your TV.
That's a tall order.
That is.
You might have to wait a few months for that.
Well, as long as you can, there's good color detectors out there. You just set them to detect the color orange and
That's right.
yeah.
What are you going to do when he's out of the news? Like
I don't know. I won't have anything at all to say on Twitter anymore.
I know.
Yeah.
We'll kind of miss him.
Kind of.
Yeah, unless he actually wins, and in which case, I don't even know. I did just brace for the apocalypse.
I don't know if it's so much bracing for the apocalypse, but it is definitely going to be, well, as long as we're still alive, fuel for every comedian on the planet.
Yeah. We should also talk about the fact that Daisy, the office dog, really did not want us to do this podcast today.
How's that?
She almost sabotaged us.
Oh, that's right. She tried to. She ran amok in the recording studio.
She ended up knocking over a microphone stand and severing one of our vital cables. And it was only through the miracle of tape and some solder that we were able to be on the air right now. So, disabled superheroes.
Disabled superheroes. Well, let's talk a little bit first about just general portrayals of people with disabilities in media. So this is from a paper called Common Portrayals of Persons with Disabilities, which I found at a website called Media Smarts. And it's kind of interesting. It talks about the different portrayals of people, and it talks about the 10 different typical portrayals. So first, let's talk about just general portrayals of people with disabilities in the media.
Right.
There's a paper called Discrimination, Disabled People in the Media. This article first appeared in Contact, number 70, Winter Edition, pages 45 through 48 in 1991. And what it said was that there are 10 commonly recurring disabling stereotypes in the mass media. These include the disabled person as pitiable and pathetic, as an object of curiosity or violence, as sinister or evil, as the super cripple, as atmosphere, as laughable, as his or her own worst enemy, as a burden, as non-sexual, and as being unable to participate in daily life. These stereotypes are particularly evident on television, in the press, and in advertising, but clearly these also carry through to comic books.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because we found those very same stereotypes repeated over and over again in comics.
Right. And sorry, when was that article
91.
published? 91? Yeah, okay. So it's a little old, but I think that it still applies now.
And this is the problem with a lot of the portrayals, because most people with disabilities are just people and want to just be seen as people. They don't want to be identified by their disability. They don't want to be defined by their disability. They just want to get on with their lives and do what they want to do without prejudgment.
Right.
And media and comics are clearly, in most cases, providing a disservice.
In some cases, absolutely. And there are a few exceptions, and we'll get to those. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we discovered in diving into this topic, is that even though on the surface you can go through and you can say, well, there's a, and we did this the other episode, right, where we went through and, hey, there's Daredevil, there's Professor Xavier, there's all these characters that have disabilities, but if you really sort of dive into it, they're not necessarily positive portrayals of disability.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the ones we found, because there was a terrific post on Comic Vine by somebody named Rawhide Kid, who apparently hasn't posted lately. Get back on that, Rawhide Kid, because you did a good list, listing the different characters that he'd found with disabilities. So we had Alicia Masters, who was blind. We had Ape X, paraplegic. Artie Maddox, mute. Barbara Gordon, paraplegic, for a good stretch of time. She wasn't always. Blind Faith, who is blind. Blindfold, who is blind. The Chief, paraplegic for the majority of his career. Count Vertigo, who is partially deaf. Cyborg, an amputee. Cyclops, partially blind without his visor. Daredevil, of course, who's blind. Deathstroke, who's blind in one eye. Destiny, who's blind. Destiny of the Endless, who's blind. Dr. Midnight, who's partially blind. Dr. Midnight again, who's partially blind. Apparently it's a different Dr. Midnight. Charles M. McNeater, who's blind. Dr. Psycho, dwarfism. Donovan Kane, amputee. Echo, deaf. Forge, amputee. Geordie LaForge, who I don't really think of as a superhero. He's a Star Trek character.
Yeah, that's...
but media portrayal, blind. Hodor, who's blind, not to be confused with Hodor from Game of Thrones.
Hold the door.
Hey, no spoilers.
Oh, sorry.
Hornet, palsied right arm. Iron Man, heart condition. Jubilee, dyscalculia.
I did not realize that.
Learning disability has to do with numbers. Karma, who's an amputee. K, blind, off and on. I'm not sure what turns that off or on. Komodo, double amputee when in human form. Libra, blind. Lizard, amputee when in human form. Luke Skywalker, again, don't think of him as a superhero. He's just your average Jedi Knight. Right. Amputee. Madame Webb, blind. Master Izo, blind. Mila Donovan, blind. Misty Knight, amputee. Mole Man, partially blind. Mr. X, paraplegic. Nick Fury, blind in one eye. Niles Cable, paraplegic. Professor Ojo, blind. Professor X, paraplegic. On again, off again. Puck, dwarfism. Shroud, blind. Silhouette, paralyzed from the waist down. Snowblind, go figure, blind. Stick, blind. Pretty good list. 47 different portrayals of superheroes. Now, I was going to sit down with this list and actually go through it to figure out how many of these were good guys and how many of these were bad guys. And what I found was that an awful lot of them, I think the majority indeed, were either bad guys or at one time were bad guys or became bad guys.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to go through that list and see what the percentage is. Absolutely. Although I noticed there is one missing, and that's Hawkeye, who in the comics is deaf.
Did not know that.
Yeah, he went deaf. He used a sonic arrow on himself to break out of a hypnotic trance and deafened himself.
Let that be a lesson to you kids. No sonic arrows to yourself.
That's right.
So if you look at that list, I'd say a good majority of them are blind. Why do you think that is, as opposed to other disabilities?
Well, the super blindness type of character has been around for a long, long time. And I think it starts with the misconception that blind people have superhuman other senses.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common stereotype that a lot of people persist in believing to this day.
Yeah.
They think that as soon as you lose your vision, all of a sudden your hearing, your smell, and your sense of touch become superhuman, far, far better than the average Joe. But the fact is they're just paying better attention to them because they're needing them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. That sort of speaks to part of the other problem with the way that disability is portrayed in comic books, and I would say in media in general, in the sense that their superpowers sort of negate the disability. So, for example, Daredevil is a good example of that. Daredevil is a blind character, but really he's not, because he has these superpowers that allow him to see. He's just in a different way.
Super echolocator. And when you boil it down to it, because he can echolocate perfectly all the time to the point where he can, knock weapons out of the air and stuff. He's not really blind per se. Actually, at the end of the day, all you could really say is that he's colorblind.
That's right.
Yeah.
But in the show, the newer show on Netflix, they do kind of touch on the fact that he struggled with his newfound extra sensitivities with his other senses.
Yeah, I read an interesting article arguing that Daredevil was actually autistic as well because of that, because where they talk about him struggling with sensation and just being overstimulated by a lot of things. They said, yeah, he's autistic and blind, which is an interesting, it's interesting. I'm not buying it, but it's interesting.
That is interesting. There's also the recurring theme of the blind martial artist. I was watching a show last night, Marco Polo, on Netflix, where we have Thousand Eyes, the character Thousand Eyes, who's a blind martial artist. And there actually are a good number of blind martial artists out there. Some of them are very, very good. We can give a shout out to our buddy Larry Lewis down in the States, who is a practitioner of jiu-jitsu and who has been in grappling competitions. And I probably wouldn't want him to ever get a hold of me if he was mad at me. I've got an ex-camp kid from the CNIB Bowen camps that we used to do, Johnny Tai, who is, I believe it's Krav Maga that he's into. He's a very high-level martial artist as well. So Larry and Johnny, I want to see you two fight.
Fight.
Yeah.
In the past, a lot of times disability is used in comics as either a plot device, or it's used as, like you said, to build certain traits in characters that are either villainous or pitiable. A lot of them aren't necessarily a realistic portrayal of disability. One thing that really surprised me, if you think about it, Professor Xavier is in a wheelchair. I don't think I've ever, in a single comic or in any of the movies, have I ever seen a wheelchair ramp anywhere in the X-Mansion.
Ooh, that's a good point.
I see a lot of stairs. I don't know how he gets upstairs or even gets out of his house.
Doesn't his chair levitate?
Yeah, I guess later in the comics it does. But
does it really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, but
it's a good
There
point.
you go.
They got some explaining to do.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about a fairly popular comic franchise, and that's the X-Men. So what's interesting about the X-Men and the idea of the mutant is that it lends itself kind of well to the idea of being disabled.
It's almost metaphorical.
It is a little metaphorical. I mean, it's always been...
I used a 5-syllable word. I'm so proud of myself.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of metaphors that you can plug into that, right? It's certainly been used as a racial metaphor, as sexism, anything that's makes people feel isolated or, different, and how isolating that is. So it does lend itself to that metaphor for sure. And I mean, if you think about all the different, X-Men characters, a lot of them have superpowers, but it's always chained with some sort of large disadvantage that puts them at a disadvantage. So, for example, you've got, say, Cyclops, who, he can shoot energy beams from his eyes, but he can't control it.
And has to wear glasses all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Or a visor.
And he's blind when the visor is off.
That's right. Well, he's not blind. He can see, but he has to keep his eyes closed or else he just destroys everything that's in front of him. So technically...
I mean, I certainly wouldn't want that, but maybe that's just me.
No, it's not. Yeah, I don't think I'd want that either. Although I do have to wear glasses all the time, so maybe, what the heck?
Yeah, kind of an upgrade,
If I gotta wear glasses all the time, then I might as well, be able to shoot energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you have Wolverine, who obviously struggles with the fact, that he's powerful, but it's not something he ever really wanted for himself.
Yep, that's right. Or
and he's had immortality thrust upon him.
Right.
Yeah, and a healing factor. Oh, such a pain.
Or in the second newest X-Men movie, what is that called? Days of Future Past.
Yep.
One of the main storylines is Professor Xavier. He gets this serum or some special drug that actually allows him to walk, but it blocks out his mutancy, I guess, his telepathy. And he actually prefers that. He, I guess, would rather walk than be super powerful.
Right. And that sends a bit of a mixed message, right? And this idea that people who are disabled need to be fixed, or that, becoming cured or normal is what they strive for.
That's true. It's
and it's kind of a damage, like that's, it's very subtle and it's in subtext, but it's still kind of there, and it's still a bit of a negative portrayal, I think.
Absolutely. There's plenty of people out there who have disabilities who have no interest in it being fixed. I know people who've been born blind and have lived blind all their lives. And, if you were to walk up to them and say, hey, you want sight? They go, no, I don't, because it's utterly foreign to them. They've learned to live their lives as they've lived their lives. And it'd be like, me walking up to you and saying, hey, you want to be able to read people's minds?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's a bad example.
That is a bad example, because yes, I would. No. At the very least, I would like a Google Glass that will let me read women's emotions. Give me that, and I'll be happy. So, that's a franchise I think that at least is lending some interesting things to the conversation, but not ideal. I think that there's one comic book character, I think, from my recollection, that I think was a really positive portrayal, and that would be Oracle.
Tell us about Oracle.
Well, Oracle is... actually, you should tell us about Oracle, because she becomes Oracle in one of your absolutely all-time favorite comic books.
You're talking about Barbara Gordon.
I am talking about Barbara Gordon.
She doesn't actually become Oracle in that. She becomes paralyzed in that
fair
favorite
enough,
comic
that's true.
book. We are referring to, of course, Batman: The Killing Joke, which is being turned into a animated movie, and I'm very excited about it.
Me too.
And it has a very catchy rhyme in it, which I have memorized.
Okay, now you got to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's see if I can remember this. When the world is full of care and every headline screams despair, when all is rape, starvation, war, and life is vile, then there's this simple thing I do which I shall pass along to you, which is always guaranteed to raise a smile. I go loony as a light bulb battered bug, simply loony, sometimes foam and chew the rug. Mr. Life is swell in a padded cell, it'll chase your blues away. You can trade your gloom for a rubber room and injections twice a day. When you're loony as an acid casualty, or a moony, or a preacher on TV. When the human... no, I've lost it.
Well, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I got there. However, it does lead straight into another disability, which is poorly portrayed in comic books, and that is mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So if you look at people who are mentally ill in comic books, they are always bad guys. There are no good guys who are mentally ill.
Yes, that's a good point.
There are good guys who are maybe a little disturbed, maybe even depressed, well, which I suppose is a form of mental illness, so I'm generalizing too much. But schizophrenia, bad guy, automatic.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Pretty much there all the time.
Yep.
Batman seems to be the worst for that. If you think of most Batman villains, they're just a bunch of crazy people. And sorry, I don't mean to use that in an offensive way, but it's true. Like
right.
they have some type of, I guess what you'd consider a mental illness.
Yeah, the Joker, the Penguin,
Joker,
yeah,
the Riddler,
yeah,
yep,
all the big ones.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a term earlier, that the Super Crip. So it's it sounds
Sorry,
super.
We didn't coin that term. By the way.
we didn't coin the term, and it sounds fairly offensive, but it's considered an archetype. But it's the idea that there are characters in comic books that have superpowers but are disabled, and those superpowers essentially negate the disability. Kind of, so a good example, again, Daredevil.
Yeah.
A lot of the amputee, like Winter Soldier, there's another good example from the both the movies and the comics. He's an amputee, but he has a giant bionic arm. So really, how is that a disability?
Yeah, again, when we were talking about the list, there was Luke Skywalker listed as an amputee. However, he's got an artificial hand that is absolutely perfectly 100% functional and slows him down in no way whatsoever. So,
Exactly.
I mean, I would argue that a bionic limb is better than a normal limb.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have some bionic limbs, please.
Hang on, let me grab my hacksaw.
So, that's not necessarily a positive portrayal of a disability. I mean, one could argue that it's not necessarily a negative, but I guess the point is it's not a realistic depiction of what it's like to be disabled.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the core of a lot of these, is that they're not realistic portrayals of disability.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about what you could call heightened abilities in people with disabilities. And I'm harking back again to Daredevil. Daredevil seems to be our fallback position here. Daredevil essentially uses echolocation for everything, only he's not making any kind of noise. So echolocation, typically, it's a real thing. There are a number of practitioners of it. And you basically make some sort of noise, often a click with your tongue, like that. And you, over time, can learn the ability to hear information about your surroundings. There's a fellow named Dan Kish in the States who is very well known for doing workshops on this. And I've seen Dan do his thing, and it can be pretty remarkable. One example that I saw was done locally here. They took a ball, they put it in the middle of a field, and they said, all right, go find it. And Dan went off and he found it.
Wow.
In a very short period of time. I don't remember exactly what the time was. But then they asked somebody else who was not an echolocator to go do the same thing. And of course, they stumbled all over the place and couldn't find the ball. Dan has used it to ride a bike.
Wow.
He uses it in just for general mobility to help navigate his surroundings. But he's become very, very good at this. And there are some famous echolocators in the past. Ray Charles was an echolocator.
Really?
He often walked around with no cane at all when he was younger. This is something that's a practiced ability, which people are capable of learning with time and patience. It's cool, maybe not super, but it's super cool.
It is.
Yeah.
So there's if you tone down Daredevil's ability there,
it's not outside the realm of possibility.
It's not outside the realm of possibility. It's just terribly, terribly exaggerated.
Yeah. So I'd say the other common theme in terms of disability in comic books is also used to sort of juxtapose against the superpower. In the comics, historically, Thor was kind of like the Hulk, where this guy named Donald Blake, he was a doctor and he used a cane. He was sort of hobbled. And he would be able to summon Thor by, I think, smashing his hammer or smashing a cane or something. He was able to sort of transform into Thor, much like Bruce Banner transforms into the Hulk, except he was able to control it and he would turn into Thor. And so this idea that, the sort of infirm, hobbled guy is, an Asgardian god as an alter ego kind of juxtaposition. And I think that that's a common usage of disability in some of the older comic books. I don't think it's very prevalent these days, but certainly historically it was.
Well, I think, superheroes now are more out than they were in the past. They were more hidden and closeted in the past. And now, with superhero pride, it's a lot easier to, come out and be more open about your superhero-ness.
I would not want to go to the superhero pride parade because that's just asking for trouble. That's just like every year, it just destroys the city center.
That's a recurring theme, though, in a lot of the more recent movies, like the Avengers. It's kind of like society turns on them. They try and do well for everybody, but it ends up causing more havoc than,
That's because they haven't learned to take the fight outside.
It's true.
I mean, come on. If you're going to have a superhero fight, take it into, the wilds of Arizona or something. You don't do it in the middle of New York City. What are you thinking, people?
It's true. But again, same with X-Men, it kind of shows the otherness of, I guess, superpowers. And like we were saying, it could be looked as a disability, looked upon as a disability.
Yeah, it's certainly treated in the same way of it being isolating and sort of alienating and sort of a deviation from the norm. This idea that disability in and of itself is something that's undesirable and needs to be fixed, or that needs to be overcome, instead of a portrayal where it's just, hey, I'm disabled. Yeah. This is my life.
Yeah, I just want to be included.
Right.
Right.
Treated equally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of, so to get back to Oracle, because we should talk about Oracle, because she's actually a fairly large player in the comic world.
Yeah.
Because for many years, she was kind of the poster child for like a disabled person in comic. And so how much do you know about Oracle?
I really don't know anything about Oracle. I've never been a huge comic book reader, largely because my parents, when I was a kid, only let me buy certain comic books. Archie was okay. Richie Rich was okay. But superhero ones, no, they didn't want anything to do with superhero ones. So not exactly sure why that is. So my actual comic book superhero knowledge is stunted.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm super familiar with her either. Although in doing the research for this week's show, I totally want to go and read that entire run of comics. But essentially, I mean, so Barbara Gordon used to be Batgirl, and she was shot by the Joker and became paralyzed, and then became sort of I don't even want to marginalize her by saying she's a behind the scenes superhero, but she becomes a computer expert, and she's
really important, actually.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
She's the brains behind the operation.
Right. So despite the fact that she's in a wheelchair, she's still able to, be instrumental. And, and she had her own series for, I think Birds of Prey started around 91 or 92, and it ran through to 2011. So many years she had, and people loved her.
Yeah. Well, from what I read, she seems to be one of the few characters that actually has a more realistic portrayal of someone with a disability.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And people really responded to that. And for whatever reason, DC in 2011, when they sort of rebooted their universe in the New 52, they ended up, quote, curing her, and sort of made her into Batgirl again. And there was a lot of blowback from that, from fans. People were really upset.
It's pretty interesting, though, because when I was reading about it, the DC editors and writers and whatnot, they were pretty against that initially. They basically said there were not enough handicapped superheroes in the DC universe to justify curing one, and because it would have been odd to see Barbara Gordon escape from her wheelchair in the world of fiction when Christopher Reeve never had that opportunity. So again, they're, comparing it to reality, and a man that was viewed as a superhero, Superman, he can't just simply be cured. So
yeah, that's right. I think it does send a bad message, that it's necessary to be cured.
Well, especially because she was such an integral part of the DC universe. There was a lot of stuff comparing her to Batman. Like, usually Batman's viewed as untouchable and super intelligent and is one of the few that has access to, so much information. But yet she was kind of on his level in that regard.
Yeah, that's right. And during the course of the comic book, I mean, she had relationships. She had a sexual relationship with Robin for a while. So
chicken, wow, wow.
that's right. And so again, this is in a comic where, in general, people with disabilities, they're seen as asexual. They're not shown in terms of romantic relationships so I mean, it was a really breakthrough comic book that and important to a lot of people.
Let's talk a little bit more about the role of the villain and disability portrayals in the role of the villain. People with dwarfism.
Okay.
Has there ever been a dwarf superhero?
Yes.
Really?
Maybe sort of.
Who?
Well, Puck. Puck was, but I mean,
Puck was a
he's
superhero.
short.
Yeah.
He was short. Yeah, he was part of Alpha Flight. I mean, I don't remember what his superpower is, but I think they just made like a short and stocky.
He teamed up with Hockey Stick and he could fly really fast.
Strong guy. He's the only one that I can think of.
Yeah, that to me is one where you always seem to see them portrayed as villains. You rarely see them portrayed as heroes.
Another thing you notice with villains too sometimes is if there's something in their story arc that disables them in any way, that kind of prompts their turn into a villain.
Yes.
Like Two-Face is an example of that.
Yes. Severe burns.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a very good point. Like the disability drives them mad, and like they become so hateful and resentful that they turn evil.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
What's another example? There's definitely a lot. I just off the top of my head.
Well, heck, you could say the Joker, right? Because doesn't the Joker fall into like a vat of acid?
Yeah, that's
true.
he's a
depending on which story arc you're looking at, he was a mobster who fell into a vat of some sort of chemical.
So I guess technically he was kind of a bad guy initially.
Yeah, he wasn't very nice to begin with.
No.
But still.
But he went from mobster to
To
criminal mastermind, I guess.
supervillain.
And schizophrenic, right?
Yeah.
Like it drove him crazy. Oh, what else?
Well, one thing I'm wondering about here is if we are pouring the snot out of every blind person who is listening to this podcast. And the reason I ask that is because there's virtually no described comic books.
Yeah, I looked into that a little bit, and I was a little shocked that there aren't very many accessible comic book options at all.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot of, you can get described movies, described TVs, you can get, books on tape, you can get all kinds of stuff like that, but there's virtually no work being done in described comic books. Now, there is an exception to that. In our wanderings, we found this site called comicsempower.com, and it's a comic book store for the blind. And actually, if you go onto the website visually, you get a big message that says, "Welcome to the comic book store for the blind. This website is dark. The store can be heard, not seen, using assistive technology." And if you go and you scroll down the page without a screen reader of some kind, it is black. You can't see any of the text on it. Now, I want to play for you the intro message from the store. So I'm just going to refresh the page here.
All around on the ceiling and the walls are big globes with mysterious bubbles inside them. Alan says, "Yeah, I suppose it's only fitting."
That's awesome.
That is
I know,
really
and
cool.
that's such a teaser too. Fitting what? What's fitting? How is it fitting? Anyways,
That's great. Okay, well, we'll definitely include that in the show notes.
yeah, if we can scroll down here, because you actually can trick it into showing you the text on the page by doing a select all on it. So if you go down the page, they've got a comic book guide, which will teach people about terminology of comics and so forth, and then you can get into different sections of the site. They've got somewhere on the order of about 50 different comic books currently up on the site, and they're adding to it all the time. They've got fantasy, sci-fi, drama, comedy, ghosts, pirates, and apparently everything else, which is a tall order because I can't imagine they've got everything else.
Well, I guess we'll have to see.
I guess.
Yeah.
I think there's a big business opportunity out there for somebody to do described comic books.
Yes.
I'm actually shocked that they don't have that. I mean, obviously, I've personally never looked into it, but I find that really surprising.
Yeah, although it is a visual media, a lot of comics wouldn't be too hard to describe and make accessible to people.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, movies are visual, but
Right.
described movies are commonplace. So.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I guess maybe the one thing that might hold them back is that I'm sure that it takes a lot of time to produce, and with the comics coming out once a month and the sheer number of comics that come out every month, it might make it hard for them to keep up.
That is true. Mm-hmm. You'd have to pick a franchise and follow it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
or maybe a few franchises.
Either that or just be behind, be a couple months behind what the current comic is, but, continue to... See, there you go. Maybe that's a new business model.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As soon as this assistive technology gig craps out, that's
what we're doing.
Yeah.
I can be the voice of Batman.
I can be Mighty Mouse.
Oh, good.
What superhero would you be, Rachel?
Oh, God. I don't know.
Could be Jean Grey.
It's true.
Could be a good Jean Grey. Yeah, so we should talk about this guy in the UK who is starting up this comic book.
He's the father of a daughter with spina bifida, and he's created a comic book about people with disabilities, for people with disabilities, and he's now being backed by Marvel's Stan Lee.
Yeah, it's very cool, and this is very much at the forefront of what we should talk about next, is where comics are going and how things are getting better.
Yeah, so this fella's name is, Dan White. His daughter is 10 years old, and she is his superhero inspiration, which is cool. And until last year, he was employed as an electrical merchant.
What?
Electrical merchants. It's a UK paper, so I assume that means that he probably sold electrical stuff.
I see.
And he worked on his drawings on and off in his spare time. Now he's doing it full time, and he's launched his own comic book called The Department of Ability, based on a team of disabled superheroes who are set to save the world, fronted by his daughter and her flying wheelchair. So you can find him at www.departmentofability.com.
Yeah, it sounds like it's getting some a lot of press, and hopefully big things come to him, because it's a very cool idea, and it's about time.
So this kind of brings me to, I guess, a different discussion point. But just after reading through some of those, I noticed that, again, like you said, it's all tech fixes, and I guess technically that's what makes them superheroes. But going back to Oracle again, she didn't need any type of fancy gadgets or, like you said, something to negate her disability.
Right.
She was just, she used her natural abilities to, I guess, fight crime and do what she needed to do. So I guess my question is, is it possible for a person with a disability to be a superhero without all the fancy, technology and things like that?
Right. It's stuff that essentially negates what their disability is.
Exactly.
Again, you're seeing a lot of the sort of the common themes in terms of, technology and stuff with this. But I think the point of this is that they're all disabled, they're all on a team, and they're all
fighting crime.
Exactly. So I guess the point of it is it's a little bit more of a positive portrayal than usual.
And it's being done from a place of love.
It is.
Cosplay. Disabled cosplayers. Along with comics, of course, you get people who are going to conventions, things like Comic-Con.
That's right.
And cosplay has become a huge thing. Dressing up as your favorite superhero or manga character or comic book character of some form.
TV show,
yeah. There's a site that we ran across called, it is Cosability, cosability.tumblr, TUMBLR.com. And it's a website for disabled cosplayers. There's a group of friends who dress up as their favorite heroes, and each of them has some form of disability, which is very cool. and they're out there cosplaying away and having a heck of a lot of fun by the looks of the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Painting themselves all kinds of different colors.
Yeah, and I think that this list, this is why I think that this topic is important. I think when we first suggested it was a bit of a throwaway, but it is actually important because comic books are so prevalent in society right now. It's important for young people to have a sense of inclusion.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Especially when there is such a huge community associated with it, like Comic-Con and all the different events they have.
Nerds.
Yeah.
That's right. But yeah, and I think that's why characters like Oracle, for example, are so important. We've been pretty negative so far in terms of how disability has been portrayed in comic books.
Well, that's because in so many cases, it's just really poor portrayals.
Right. So I guess my point is that it's starting to change. There is good news.
Yeah. So you want to look on the bright side?
I want to look on the
Let's
bright
look
side.
on the bright side.
Because I love comic books. I mean, more and more in general, I would say diversity is becoming more of a thing. There's our transgendered superheroes now. There's a plus size superhero.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's another case where there's a negative portrayal of people who are heavier. The vast majority of them are supervillains.
Right. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's
Kingpin,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blob. I mean, that's offensive right there. The Blob.
Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah,
That's right.
and actually talking about diversity, I just read an article today that as in the next Star Trek movie, Mr. Sulu is coming out.
Oh, that's awesome.
They're making his character openly gay.
Cool.
And it's kind of a nod to George Takei, who, of course, made Sulu iconic in the first place, who's been a outspoken
LGBTQ plus, etc.
There we go, LGBTQ plus. I can never keep that all straight. It keeps getting bigger. It used to just be LGBT, and then it keeps on expanding out. Anyway, so it's a very positive nod to Mr. Takei and all the work that he's done over the years.
I think in general, though, comic books often reflect what's going on in society.
Very true.
Like in the 60s, for example, you saw Black Panther, who was the first African-American superhero, which, of course, is when the civil rights movement was taking off in America anyways. And, and I mean, I think once there's more awareness, around differences, then you'll start to see more of that in, I guess, pop culture in general. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it was just announced yesterday, right, that the new Iron Man is going to be a 15-year-old black girl.
Okay, and that I have a problem with.
Okay.
Wait, what? Is that serious?
That's dead serious.
What?
Yeah, Tony Stark is stepping aside, and he is giving his super suit to a 15-year-old black girl.
Oh my goodness.
Now,
that's interesting.
Here's my problem with it. I have a 15-year-old daughter. There is no way that I'm ever giving my 15-year-old daughter a super suit. Yeah. That's just not going to happen. I mean, a tantrum now is bad enough, but a tantrum where she can fly off to Kazakhstan, no, I'm just not. I'm not going with that. No, I'm sorry. 15 is too young for a super suit.
Well, you can't drive. If you can't even operate a motor vehicle,
true.
you shouldn't have repulsors.
Yeah.
Like that just should be.
Yeah.
So you'd have been fine if she had been 18.
No.
21.
Still
she could vote.
Still pushing the limits.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. I mean, 21. At least they're a full-on legal adult and responsible for their own actions. So
Well, I was 21. I wouldn't say I was responsible. I don't know.
legally, you were
Legally, yeah.
yeah. You knocked down New York. You're responsible, Mister.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I guess the point though is things are rapidly changing in the industry, and like Rachel said, it's because of what's going on in our society, and we're becoming more attuned to the idea of diversity, and so even in the last few years, there's been some movement. In 2014, I believe, in Archie Comics, they introduced a character in a wheelchair. So yeah, and the story behind that is pretty interesting. Basically, at a fan expo in Toronto, a woman in a wheelchair named Jewel Katz came up to one of the Archie writers that was there,
Dan Parent,
who was at a panel, and just rolled up to him and asked him why there were no disabled characters in Archie comics. And they got to talking, and lo and behold, a year later, the character of Harper Lodge was introduced, who was in a wheelchair.
And Harper Lodge is a fashion designer. She's of mixed race and uses a wheelchair following a car accident when she was a young girl. And the parent was keen to point out that she isn't just a disability character, but she's part of the gang and just happens to be disabled.
Right. And granted, Archie comics are different than, say, superhero comics.
Yeah.
But
They are kind of utopian.
right.
I mean, really, realistically, how likely is it that a guy could hit on two girls that long and not have one of them kill him?
That's true. That's true. And I have noticed that Archie has been fighting zombies, and I believe the Predator. I believe there was a Predator crossover. I kid you not.
There's been a lot of wacky crossovers with Archie.
Yeah. So will we see more disabled characters portrayed in media in general? What do you think?
I would say so. As Rachel pointed out, a lot of times the impetus behind creation of new characters or changing the way that characters are portrayed is a reflection of society and society's values. And I think as we have greater understanding of disability and people with disabilities, I think we'll have better portrayals in comic books of those people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well said. I think your superpower is well-spoken. You're a well-spoken man.
Yeah, let's trying to think who my nemesis would be.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Stutterbot.
Spit it out, man. That's your catchphrase. It's your rally call. All right. So what have we learned today about disabilities in comic books? What can we sum this up as?
Well, we learned just from the research that there were far more portrayals of disability in comics than we ever expected. Mm-hmm. A huge proportion of them are people who are blind. And a huge proportion of those have extraordinary abilities.
Right.
And I guess we've also learned that we can see already the trends in pop culture are improved portrayals, not as parochial attitudes towards people with disabilities, and that's good.
Hopefully, it's moving in the right direction. And Archie has a lot of weird crossovers.
Yeah.
Archie has a lot of weird crossovers.
So I'd say, I don't know, anybody out there who wants a reading recommendation, I'd recommend go out and read Birds of Prey, which is the series that features Oracle. That's what I'm going to do.
I think we've discovered is probably one of the best portrayals of a character with a disability.
Yep, absolutely. And it looks like the tide's turning, but we still have some ways to go. And they need to put in wheelchair ramps in the X Mansion.
Yes,
Damn
absolutely.
Because that's ridiculous. Professor Xavier would never get out of his study in that place.
And let's face it, you could say, but there's elevators. But that would never work because that place gets attacked
all the time.
All the time, constantly. And I'm sure the first time that alarm goes off, you're not supposed to use the elevator.
That's right. Well, I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. Have we put everyone to sleep yet? That'd be a yes. All right. Well, should we leave it at that?
I think we should.
All right. Well, so we don't have any information about next week's show, but it'll be a show. It'll be a show. I'll be here. Steve will be here. And Ryan will likely be
He'll
here.
be back. And Rachel will breathe a sigh of relief.
That's
Yep.
right. She can go back to normal life.
We'll see what the topics are. I'll be back, I'm sure, at some point.
I'm sure you will.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, we do have that extra microphone. So.
That's true.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Interesting. Then that is going to do it for us this week. Thanks everybody for listening in. If you have any comments, you want to let us know that if we missed a comic book character that or that you want us to follow up on, let us know. Drop us a line. Our email address is... Steve doesn't know. He's giving me a blank look.
atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, so good. And we also have a website, www.atbanter.com. And we have a Facebook page, which is www.facebook.com/atbanter, all one word.
That's awesome. We got through that.
I think we did.
Yeah.
I think we got through that unscathed. Although, do we want to give the Aroga Technologies website?
And of course, for all your assistive technology needs, you can find us at www.aroga.com. That's AROGA.
.com.
.com.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. And we will see you next week.
And you are?
Do we have to do that?
Every time.
We do. I don't know. Okay. And I'm Rob Minot.
I'm Steve Barkley.
And I'm Rachel Nolan.
And we will see you next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Aroga Technologies. Visit Aroga Technologies online at www.aroga.com. That's AROGA.com. Music provided by bensound.com.